Let's start this conversation by thinking about the room you were sitting in when you decided what to do with your life. For most people, it was a classroom, or a kitchen table with a parent across from it, or a career counselor's office that smelled like old carpet and mild disappointment. You were 16, maybe 17. You'd had 3 jobs total: babysitting, a till at a supermarket, and possibly something involving a deep fryer. And in that room, someone handed you a form or a brochure or a very patient expression and essentially asked, "What do you want to be for the next 50 years?" You picked something. Of course you did. You were 17. You picked the thing that sounded impressive, or the thing your parents thought was stable, or the thing your best friend was doing, or, and this is the most honest answer, the thing you were least afraid of at the time. That decision is now running your life. Most career mistakes aren't made at 40. They're made at 17, and then defended for the next 20 years because admitting you got it wrong feels worse than staying wrong. We don't call it that, obviously. We call it building experience, or paying dues, or being realistic. But underneath all of it is the same thing: a teenager's guess, quietly calcifying into a life sentence. The reason you're watching this video is probably because you already know that. So before you look at any job board, before you update your LinkedIn, before you do anything external, you have to do something most people skip entirely. You have to figure out what you actually want. Not what sounds good, not what pays well in theory. What you, specifically, operating as a person with your distinct history and your particular nervous system, and your own definition of a good day, actually want. This sounds obvious. It almost never gets done. Here's where most people go wrong. They confuse what they enjoy with what they're good at, and then pick one and ignore the other. I know someone who spent 8 years building a career in graphic design because she loved art. She was fine at it, but not exceptional. She found it draining in a way she couldn't explain for years, until she realized she'd been trying to turn a hobby into a job and had managed to ruin both. The painting she used to do to decompress became the thing giving her stress. What you enjoy and what you're good at are 2 different questions. You need both answers on the table before you start matching them to anything. The third question, the one almost nobody asks honestly, is what you actually want the career to give you. Status? Salary? Flexibility? Meaningful work? These aren't embarrassing answers. They're necessary ones. Because if you don't define what winning looks like, you'll spend another decade chasing the wrong thing. I've met people who took a 20% pay cut chasing purpose and found out they actually wanted to be able to pay for school trips without checking their bank account first. I've met people who chase salary and discovered at 50 that they've been buying comfort for a life they didn't actually like. Neither answer is wrong, but you have to know which one is yours before you move. And one more thing, while we're being honest with each other, stop fighting your personality. If you're someone who finds extended social performance genuinely exhausting, not introvert as personality brand, actually exhausting, then chasing high-status, public-facing roles is going to grind you down in ways that have nothing to do with talent. The job might be right, the shape of it might be wrong for how you're built. Here's where the veteran advantage starts to show up. You've been disappointed before. You know what it looks like when something sounds better than it is. You know the gap between how a job gets described in a brochure and what it actually involves at 9 on a Tuesday morning when everything is behind and your manager is in a mood. Use that. Before you commit to any direction, find someone who is actually doing the job you think you want. Not a recruiter, not a LinkedIn post. Someone 2 years in, who is past the honeymoon period and hasn't yet found the diplomatic language to make it sound better than it is. Buy them a coffee. Ask them what their worst Tuesday looks like. Ask them what the growth ceiling actually is, not what the job description says it is. Ask them what they wish they'd known. Most people research careers the way they read TripAdvisor reviews. They look at the best ones and assume that's representative. You've been around long enough to read the 1 stars first. The other thing to check is the actual state of the industry. Not whether it sounds interesting, whether there's room. Some fields are genuinely oversaturated, more people wanting in than the market can absorb. Some are contracting. Some have a growth ceiling that means you'll hit a wall in 4 years regardless of how good you are. These things are findable. Industry reports, honest conversations with people already inside. Your discernment, the thing you built across a decade of wrong turns, is exactly what makes you better at reading this than a 22-year-old who wants to believe it's going to work out. The practical reality of changing careers in your 30s or 40s is that it has weight to it in a way it didn't at 22. There's probably a mortgage, or close to one, maybe a child, or the plan for one, loan repayments, the kind of financial obligations that turn a "I'm going to try something new" decision into a much more loaded conversation with yourself at midnight. This is real, and pretending it isn't is how people make reckless pivots that don't stick. The answer isn't to stay put because of fear. The answer is to build a war chest before you move. Figure out what you need to survive 6 months with reduced income. Save it. Actively, specifically, with that number in your head. That number turns an abstract, terrifying leap into a concrete plan with a date attached to it. The fear doesn't go away, but it stops running the decision. On the skills gap, you are almost certainly not starting from scratch, even if it feels that way. The years you spent in the wrong career weren't wasted. You learned how organizations actually work. You learned how people behave under pressure and how they behave when they think nobody's watching. You learned what a dysfunctional team looks like from the inside and what a well-run one feels like. A 24-year-old interviewing for the same role you are has none of that, so frame it accordingly. Which leaves the last thing, the one that doesn't get said directly enough. Fear is the only obstacle that actually matters. Not the economy, not your age, or the gap in your CV. Those are real factors that require real planning, but they're solvable problems. Fear isn't a problem. It's a decision. Every person who stays stuck in the wrong career past the point where they know it's wrong has made a choice, repeatedly, to let fear win. That's not a judgment. I made that choice for years. But it is worth naming clearly, because the moment you stop treating fear as an external obstacle and start treating it as a daily decision, the whole thing shifts. So, when the path is finally clear, when you've done the internal work, run the market intelligence, built the financial buffer, and made the actual decision, something changes. You stop moving like someone who is guessing. A 20-year-old changing careers is rolling the dice. They might land well, or they might not, but they don't have enough information about themselves or the world to know the difference between a good bet and wishful thinking. You do, because you move with a precision that looks, from the outside, like confidence, but it's actually just the result of having been wrong enough times to know what right feels like when you're standing in it. That's not a small thing. There's one more piece to this, though, and it's the part most career pivot advice never gets to. Having the map is one thing. Finding the energy to actually execute it consistently across months of transition and uncertainty, and the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from building something new while you're still responsible for everything old. But that's a different conversation. We're having it another time.